ultra-Orthodox Jews, this is a show of faith. It's also a demonstration against a High Court ruling which could now require some of them to serve in the Israeli military. The court overturned a law which gave mass exemptions from the military draft for seminary students, labelling it unreasonable and unconstitutional. In Israel, Jewish men and women can be drafted once they turn 18 years old. Men are required to serve 2 years and 8 months. Women need to serve 2 years. Military service is viewed by some as the great equaliser in Israeli society, because no matter a person's background, they each have an obligation to contribute. But the ultra-Orthodox community, also known as the Haredi, has not faced the same duties, and that has caused friction.
This is why we have come to politics. Conscription for everybody. Work for everybody. Benjamin Netanyahu can no longer continue to wiggle out all the time. Military conscription is for everybody, not only for the suckers who don't have a party in his coalition.
Haredi have long argued that studying the Torah is vital for the survival of the Jewish faith, and that forcing their flock to become part of a secular service could irrevocably change their community. Some Haredi do serve in the army, combining their religious studies with their military service. But they can also face recrimination from their community for doing it. This is an effigy of a Haredi soldier which was strung up earlier this year. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government has been given a year to change the legislation. The Haredi parties are a key part of his alliance. But will the political cost of a more egalitarian military service be too divisive for Israeli society? Natalie Pohonen, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this further, I'm joined by the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, Yitzhak Pindris. He's a member of the ultra-Orthodox United Torah Judaism Party. Also from West Jerusalem is Dov Lipman. He's a former member of the Knesset representing the secular Yesh Atid party. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure having both of you on the program. Dov, let me begin with you. Should the ultra-Orthodox be drafted into the Israeli army?
I don't think I can answer that question in a definitive, all-across-the-board way. It's a very complex issue. There are young men who study the religious texts day and night. This is their one pursuit. This is a real service to the Jewish people, and they should not be disturbed from that learning at all. And even those who aren't necessarily studying all day, they should have a few years to study, to be what we call the yeshiva, to build themselves up spiritually. But then at a certain point, I do believe that those who aren't studying day and night should either do army service or some kind of national service at a certain point and pave the way for them to enter into the workforce. So it's not a black and white issue, but I certainly would not say draft everyone, and we have to find each person their own place in their own time.
Yitzhak, does that sound reasonable to you?
I have to say that I think for the first time in my public life, I agree with Dov Lipman. I think whoever is studying has to be staying and studying. Whoever is not has to serve. I think it's very obvious.
Yitzhak, the Knesset lawmakers deferred.
I have to agree. I have to say...
Certainly, they deferred the conscription. Should the courts have stayed out of it and not gotten involved afterwards?
First of all, I want to say two things. First of all, as a fact, no doubt that a court that gets involved in a Knesset passing a law the third time means something on the court and says really the court is not connected to what's happening in Israel, because the Knesset by the end of the day is a political place that's elected by the nation. But outside of that, I want to be practically. I think almost each individual in Israel and each public servant in Israel understands that there's no way to draft guys that are studying by taking them to jail or anything like that, because it's not going to happen. What is going to do that people that wanted to serve in the army are going to want to be identified with those yeshiva boys, the guys that are studying and being with them, they're not going to go to the army. That's the only thing that a change of what's happening now, or a law that's happening now, could happen through that decision. I don't think anything real more than that is going to happen.
Yitzhak, how do you feel about the idea that the Supreme Court justices ruled 8-1 in favor of this? That's massive, right? You're saying they're out of touch with what's going on. It was 8-1. This is a pillar of democracy.
There is no. It's not. Let's make things very obvious. This is something that's been going on between the Orthodox and the non-Orthodox since the Israeli state was established in 1948. It's not something new, and these are things that there is a disagreement between. Generally, the public and non-religious people and the Orthodox. That's something that's been going on forever. Of course, the Supreme Court, which rules by the Israeli law, are not people that are affiliated with the ultra-Orthodox community. No one of the ultra-Orthodox community joined ever the Supreme Court. And it's a group of people, very obvious, and I think from other countries you know how it looks like. It's a certain group of people with a certain status that they're a part of those judges. So it's not something that I'm surprised, wow, I don't believe it. Well, those people, that's what all of them think. That's what all of them think. We knew that beforehand. We knew that today. That's a difference between democracy. And you know what's happening today in Israel, that 30% of the children of the first grade are under the ultra-Orthodox education and the private ultra-Orthodox education. So that means something about what's happening to Israel. And that threats a lot, I would say, the public and at least that group, that the Supreme Court are part of that group. They're very threatened by the growth of the ultra-Orthodox. I feel it, as a matter of fact, in Jerusalem. There's today over 40% of ultra-Orthodox, over 65% of Orthodox in Jerusalem. And a lot of people are frightened of it. So they're trying to pass all kinds of laws.
I see.
But, you know, it's not going to help.
Dov, let me ask you my first question the other way around. Let me ask you, if somebody says, I'm ultra-Orthodox, and I study in a yeshiva, and I should be absolutely blanket, categorically exempt from serving in Israel's army, from serving in the IDF. Would you go along with that?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud to live in a country where on such a difficult issue of religion and state and religious issues, we live in a world where religious issues are not dealt with in the way that we're having a conversation right now, or even in a democratic way in the courts or the parliament. They're usually fighting in the streets, and we're not, and I'm very proud that we're having this dialogue. Again, somebody who is absolutely studying day and night, this is their pursuit. That's a service for the Jewish people. That's a service for the state of Israel, and we bless them, and they should be supported. And it's not just me, as someone who's religious, even the chairman of my party, if he was sitting here, Yair Lapid, he would be saying the same thing. The controversy is about those who might be in sort of an in-between stage where they're saying they're learning day and night, but they're really not. And again, boys who are in yeshiva, I respect them. This is a tremendous thing. My own son spent years in yeshiva. I did as well. We have to figure out the right balance. It doesn't have to be army service. It could also be national service. It doesn't have to be army service in the regular army. We can find special units and ways to make them comfortable. But I do want to pick on the last point that the deputy mayor mentioned. My dream would be that there will be ultra-Orthodox members of the Supreme Court in Israel, and that will happen in a generation or two as those who are not studying day and night slowly find their way to balance. On the one hand, being Talmudic scholars, being fervently religious, but also being part of society. I can tell you that my father of blessed memory, from an ultra-Orthodox yeshiva background, was a judge in the United States government. It exists in America. It can exist here in Israel as well, and we're in that process. And I believe in a generation or two we'll get there as we try to work out these issues together.
There's a feeling amongst some as they've responded, and we saw some of it when it came to the clashes with the police as well, that listen, we follow God's law, we don't follow a secular law or man-made law. Is that really helpful when it comes to this situation? Yeah.
I'll start really with what Dov really said. I'll start with what Dov ended with. There's no way, okay, an ultra-Orthodox Jew would be part of the, and I'm saying an ultra-Orthodox, there's maybe other groups in Israel that are Orthodox, but they're not ultra-Orthodox, and they see things different. We see very clear that it's against our Bible, against our tradition, against our religion to be part of a court that rules not by rules of the Bible. Okay? There's a difference between doing that in Israel, which is a Jewish state, than doing that in the United States, which is a Christian state, basically. Of course, not a Jewish state. Okay, that's the difference between being a judge in the United States and being a judge in Israel. In Israel, we think it's against the Jewish law, and that's why there's no way we're going to be part of it. And we're going to do anything we can that the game should go through the democratic institution, which is the parliament. One more point than what you're asking, and I'm not running away from the question. There's one thing that's very clear, okay? We as Jews, for 2,000 years, we sacrificed our lives, we sacrificed our everything we can to keep those people in studying. We'll do anything we can, and even more than that, to make sure that the guys that are sitting and studying will stay in yeshiva, no matter how they'll call it and however they'll say it. It's very obvious and very clear. And what Gafni is saying is also very simple. We're going to do everything to get it back into the Knesset and use the parliament. And even the parliament, it's not going to work. Yes, very clear. No one is going to go to the army. If they'll arrest 80,000 yeshiva guys, let them arrest them.
Dov, when you look at some of the practicalities, when you see that perhaps practically speaking, some Haredi men, even if they go into the army, they might not want to serve alongside women. There might be a lot of practical issues to deal with here. Isn't it going to be more of a headache for the IDF? Why don't they just, leave it as things stand, leave it as is?
So first of all, I believe that the accommodations can be made and are being made. I've visited with ultra-Orthodox people on the highest level who are in the army at different levels of their lives, and the accommodations are made. And sometimes if something is violated and it wasn't dealt with properly, we have to deal with it. And it's part of the challenge of a Jewish state in 2017. But as we look back of 2,000 years of our history, as the deputy mayor mentioned, the 2,000 years of history were not people who sat and studied Torah day and night as their only pursuit. The greatest rabbis combined together their learning together with work, and we have our traditions all teach us that a father is obligated to teach a son a trade. We had armies that were filled with the most religious people. The challenge of our time is to make sure that those who are really studying Torah day and night, that exclusive elite group, that they should be taken care of and they can do so, and that the rest not, God forbid, be dragged into an army which will hurt them spiritually, religiously, and not in any way to be going into study halls and arresting anybody, but to work together so that they're serving in the army if they choose to, in national service. There are many, many options out there in which they could serve the country. That will do a tremendous amount, first of all, for them as they begin to make their way into the workforce, where they combine being religious and studying and supporting their families with dignity. It'll also do a lot for healing and repairing the Jewish people in Israel, where we're dealing with this issue. And like I said before, this is a process. We are working through it. And for me, there's nothing great short of a blessing and a thrill to be part of that process. And as long as we respect one another along the way, I have no doubt they'll be able to reach that proper balance as time goes forward.
Yitzhak Pendris, if the standoff continues and we see the government, for want of a better word, trying to enforce this, is this going to hurt the government? Is it going to lose its ultra-Orthodox support? Is this going to hurt Prime Minister Netanyahu politically?
I think it's a side issue. No doubt that the Orthodox parties could not be part of a coalition of a government that's arresting 80,000 guys that are sitting and studying, and no doubt, or trying to change the status quo about students of yeshiva going to the army. No doubt that a government like that could not continue and function with a coalition with ultra-Orthodox, no doubt. That's why I think Netanyahu is going to try to change that specific law. I do agree with Lippman that there could be an army with Orthodox and with the ultra-Orthodox. I myself served in the army. That's something that could be done. And if we're talking about a percentage, yes, we have to go back at the times of King David, when 50% was sitting and studying, 50% of the nation was sitting and studying, the other 50% could serve in the army. When we're talking about 10%, we're far, far, far from the real numbers that have to exist in Israel.
Dov, do you expect there to be a big legal fight ahead?
There's definitely going to be a lot of maneuvering inside the Knesset. My hope is that people will look at the law for what it says, which is not at all going into the yeshivas and dragging people out. That's not going to be happening according to anybody's picture. Even the films that you might be seeing of recent days of violence in the streets, that's not over this specific law. It's about people who didn't even report to the draft board to get their exemption. There's been no one that's being arrested because of any of the legislation lately. There definitely will be a legislative battle. I do agree that the parliament is the place where this should play out, and then we go to elections at some point, whether it's now or in 2 years from now. People can vote based on what they believe about this and many other issues, and that's, again, part of being part of a democratic state. There is an ultra-Orthodox population here who are citizens of the country. They have a vote and they have a say, and we respect them. I respect them for standing up for the principles and the values which they believe in, even if we disagree somewhat. I'd like to see a prime minister and some other ministers who actually have a stance about the issue one way or the other and don't sort of go back and forth based on the wind of the political times that we live and what they need to stay in power. But either way, this is all part of a process. It's part of a process which we may not see the end of. It's a few generations as we're trying to work out a Jewish and democratic state and trying to figure out the exact status of those who are studying the Torah, those who are not truly studying the Torah. And there will be a legislative battle. There might be further court battles. Who knows exactly what will be, but that's part of the democratic powers in Israel trying to determine what's best in this issue. And I'm thrilled that we don't live in a dictatorship of any kind where anybody's coming down and saying this is what must be, forcing the way on the people. The people themselves have to work this out, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I've got to move on. But it's been good getting a deep dive on this issue with both of you gentlemen, Yitzhak Pindris and Dov Lipman. I thank you both for joining us on the Newsmakers.